The crystalline observation deck of the hegemony flagship Eternal Dawn hung silently at the edge of the Sol system, its advanced sensors gathering data about the third planet. Supreme Commander Zixtal stood before the sweeping holographic displays, their soft blue glow reflecting off his iridescent scales. His secondary eyes blinked in rapid succession as they processed the stream of information about this newly discovered world. Primitive propulsion systems detected in their orbital vehicles, reported Science Officer Kelvax, her tendrils weaving complex patterns that expressed both curiosity and dismissal. They still rely on chemical rockets to reach their own satellite. Zixtal's mandibles clicked in amusement. Show me their military capabilities. The holographic display shifted, presenting detailed scans of Earth's armed forces. Tanks crawling on metal treads across desert sands, aircraft powered by combustion engines and lift surfaces, naval vessels that floated on the planet's vast oceans rather than hovering above them. Most notably, their infantry still carried weapons that used chemical propellants to launch metal projectiles. Fascinating, Zixtal murmured, though his tone suggested the opposite. They haven't even developed basic particle beam technology. What are their defensive capabilities? Limited orbital detection systems, Kelvax responded, manipulating the display to show Earth's radar and satellite network. Their most advanced installations could perhaps detect our scout ships, but the primary fleet's stealth systems will render us completely invisible to their sensors. The Supreme Commander moved closer to the display, his tall frame casting long shadows across the deck. In his centuries of service to the hegemony, he had overseen the integration of 17 worlds into their empire. Each conquest had required careful planning, detailed strategic analysis, and complex military operations. This world, however, seemed almost too easy. Their population centers are particularly vulnerable, noted battle strategist Muxtel, joining them at the display. No energy shields, no automated defense systems. Their buildings are simple structures of metal and stone. Zixtal watched as the display cycled through images of Earth's major cities: New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing. Such densely packed populations with such minimal protection. The humans even built their military installations in obvious locations, clearly marked on their own digital networks. Their communication systems are equally primitive, Kelvax added. They rely primarily on physical transmission lines and simple broadcast signals. Their encryption methods are basic. The Supreme Commander felt a slight twinge of disappointment. He had hoped this mission would provide some challenge, some opportunity to demonstrate the tactical excellence that had earned him his position. Instead, it appeared to be little more than a formality. Prepare the standard Conquest protocol, he ordered, turning away from the display. We'll establish primary landing zones in their agricultural regions, then expand outward to secure population centers. Their military installations can be neutralized from orbit if necessary. Should we prepare for extended resistance operations? Muxtel asked, their battle reflexes causing their armor plates to shift in anticipation. Zixtal's primary eyes narrowed. I doubt it will be necessary. Their weapons can't penetrate our basic shield technology. Their aircraft will be useless once we establish atmospheric control. Their ground forces. He paused, watching a grainy video of human soldiers conducting training exercises. They still practice physical combat with primitive projectile weapons. This operation should be concluded within a standard cycle. As the command staff dispersed to prepare the invasion fleet, Zixtal remained for a moment, studying the blue-green world that spun slowly in the holographic display. 17 worlds he had conquered, each one adding new techniques and technologies to the hegemony's already vast knowledge base. This one, it seemed, would offer nothing of value except its resources and labor force. Such a pity, he muttered to himself as he turned to leave. I had hoped these humans might prove more interesting. The observation deck fell silent as its occupants departed, its sensors continuing their dutiful observation of the seemingly primitive world below. None of them noticed that several of their probe signals had already been detected by a small research station in Antarctica, or that encrypted transmissions were already racing through Earth's networks, carrying the first warning of what was to come. Storm clouds gathered over the Kansas wheat fields as the first light of dawn painted the horizon in shades of amber and gold. The morning silence was broken by a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. High above, the clouds began to glow with an otherworldly purple light. First Lieutenant Sarah Chen watched through her binoculars from the concealed observation post as the massive dropships descended through the cloud cover. Their sleek, crystalline hulls pulsed with internal energy, shedding raindrops that turned to steam before they could reach the ground. The vessels were beautiful in their alien perfection, each one larger than a football field. All units maintain position, she whispered into her throat mic. Let them deploy fully before we spring the trap. Acknowledgement lights winked green across her tactical display, hidden in the modified contact lens she wore. The dropships touched down with impossible grace for their size, their landing struts barely leaving impressions in the rain-softened earth. Massive doors rised open along their flanks, revealing the soldiers of the hegemony in their full battle glory. They were magnificent and terrifying. 3-meter-tall warriors encased in armor that seemed to flow like liquid metal, each step accompanied by a subtle shimmer of their personal energy shields. They moved with perfect precision, forming up in gleaming ranks that would have made any drill sergeant weep with envy. Poor things, murmured Sergeant Garcia over the tactical net. They have no idea what they're walking into. Lieutenant Chen allowed herself a small smile. The aliens' formation was indeed perfect. For fighting on open ground against a conventional force, they had positioned themselves exactly where the Earth forces had hoped they would. The hegemony commander's voice boomed across the field, automatically translated by their technology into flat, mechanical English. This is Battle Leader Vextor of the Hegemony Forces. Your world is now under our protection. Surrender your weapons and prepare for integration into the greater galaxy. Chen keyed her mic. All units, execute Operation Scarecrow. The first sign that something was wrong came when the lead rank of alien warriors suddenly dropped knee-deep into what had appeared to be solid ground. The seemingly firm earth beneath their feet had been carefully prepared over the past week, transformed into a semi-fluid mass by specialized bacterial colonies developed in underground labs. Before the aliens could react, the real attack began. Modified combine harvesters, their agricultural equipment replaced with banks of railguns, burst from their camouflaged positions in the surrounding silos. Their weapons had been carefully calibrated based on data gathered from the Antarctic Research Station's analysis of the alien probe signals. The aliens' energy shields flared brilliant purple as they tried to deflect the incoming fire, but the human weapons had been precisely tuned to resonate with the shield's frequency. Half of the rounds passed through as if the barriers didn't exist, while the others created cascading overload patterns in the energy fields. Second phase, initiate. Chen ordered, triggering her own position's weapon systems. Across the battlefield, what had appeared to be random pieces of abandoned farm equipment revealed themselves as cleverly disguised weapon platforms. Automated turrets emerged from irrigation pipes. Grain silos split open to reveal missile batteries. The alien battle formation, so perfect moments before, dissolved into chaos. Their rigid tactical programming had no protocols for dealing with ground that fought back or weapons that shouldn't have been able to harm them. Warriors tried to retreat, only to find their heavy armor working against them in the transformed soil. Battle Leader Vextor's voice crackled over their broadcasters again, this time with a noticeable edge of panic. This is impossible. Your weapons are primitive. Your technology is inferior. Welcome to Earth, Chen muttered, watching as the carefully orchestrated trap closed around the aliens. You might want to update your intel. The morning sky turned into a storm of steel and energy as more human forces revealed themselves. The aliens fought back with advanced energy weapons, but their shots went wide as they struggled to track targets that seemed to appear and disappear at random through the rain and carefully generated sensor interference. In high orbit, Supreme Commander Zixtal received the first reports of the disaster unfolding below. His mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation as he realized that perhaps, just perhaps, he had made a terrible mistake in his assessment of human capabilities. Inside the crystalline command ship Eternal Dawn, Supreme Commander Zixtal's scales had lost their usual luster as he reviewed the casualty reports from Kansas. The data streams painted a grim picture. 30% of the initial landing force disabled, 2 dropships severely damaged, and most concerning of all, evidence that the humans had somehow predicted their arrival. "Deploy the Cyber Warfare Division," he commanded, his secondary eyes fixed on the swirling holographic displays. "Shut down their primitive networks. Without communications, they'll be unable to coordinate their resistance." Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Captain Maya Rodriguez watched as the first wave of alien cyber attacks hit Earth's networks. Her team of hackers and cyber warfare specialists had been preparing for this moment since the first alien probe signals were detected. "They're targeting military communications first," reported Lieutenant Kim from his station, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces, "just as we expected. Activating Protocol Hydra." Rodriguez smiled as she watched their defensive systems engage. The aliens were about to discover why trying to control Earth's internet was like trying to herd cats. "Their attack patterns are elegant," Kim noted, genuine admiration in his voice. "Each intrusion attempt follows perfect mathematical progressions. Beautiful. Really. Too beautiful." The alien cyber weapons were indeed works of art. Precise, powerful, and utterly predictable. They sliced through standard military encryptions with ease, only to become hopelessly entangled in the chaotic web of civilian networks that had been intentionally interwoven with critical systems. On the Eternal Dawn, the Cyber Warfare Division's leader, Techmaster Cynthia, was experiencing something entirely new: confusion. "Impossible," she chittered, her tendrils writhing in agitation. "Their systems are a maze of contradictions. Commercial data flows through military channels. Entertainment networks carry encrypted commands. Nothing follows proper protocols. The humans had done the unthinkable. Rather than hardening their military networks, they had camouflaged them within the vast ocean of civilian digital traffic. Critical commands hopped between social media platforms, hidden in plain sight among cat videos and food pictures. Control signals bounced through gaming servers, disguised as routine player data. "They're using our own attacks against us," one of Cynthia's subordinates reported in alarm. "Every time we breach a network, they allow us to capture false data packets that corrupt our targeting systems." Rodriguez watched with satisfaction as the alien cyber warriors fell into one trap after another. "Launch Phase 2, she ordered. "Let's show them what real chaos looks like." Across the globe, dormant programs awakened. Civilian smartphones became nodes in a vast distributed defense network. Gaming consoles transformed into crypto processing units. Even smart refrigerators joined the digital battle, their modest processors contributing to the overwhelming flood of data that began to swamp the aliens' sophisticated but rigid systems. On the Eternal Dawn, alarms began to sound as the ship's own networks detected thousands of intrusion attempts. Each one was minor, barely a threat on its own, but they came from everywhere at once. "Our behavioral prediction algorithms are failing," Cynthia reported to Zixtal, her usual confidence shattered. "Humans, they don't follow logical patterns. Their networks are organic, constantly evolving. Every time we adapt to their methods, they change them completely." Zixtal watched in mounting horror as his ship's defensive systems began to falter. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were learning, adapting, using the hegemony's own cyber weapons as templates to create new attacks. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships are to sever network connections immediately. We cannot risk further contamination." But the order came too late for some. Several support ships had already fallen victim to human counterattacks, their navigation systems corrupted by data packets that seemed to come from their own command structure. In her mountain bunker, Rodriguez allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before turning to her team. "Well done, everyone. But this is just the beginning. They'll adapt, come back stronger. We need to be ready." She looked at the global situation display, where green lights showed human forces regaining control of digital infrastructure across the planet. The aliens had expected to find a primitive, fragmented network. Instead, they had discovered that Earth's digital chaos was its greatest defense, a living, breathing ecosystem that turned their own precision against them. The gleaming spires of Singapore's business district reflected the morning sun, their surfaces unmarred despite the alien occupation force that had claimed the city 3 days ago. Battle leader Martix stood atop the Marina Bay sands, his armor's enhanced optics scanning the seemingly peaceful urban landscape below. "Sector 7 secured," he reported to the command network. "No resistance detected in the financial district for 26 hours. The words had barely left his mandibles when the first anomaly appeared on his sensors. A subtle temperature shift in the underground transit system, barely noticeable even to their advanced detection equipment. Martix dismissed it as a routine power fluctuation, right until the ground beneath his feet began to vibrate. In the command bunker beneath the city, Colonel Wei Lin watched through networked sensors as her trap was sprung. "Execute Operation Anthill," she ordered, her voice calm despite the stakes. "Let's show them why you should never trust a quiet city." The first phase triggered instantly. Dozens of maintenance robots, their normal cleaning protocols replaced with military software, emerged from their charging stations throughout the metro system. Each one carried a small but powerful electromagnetic pulse generator, carefully tuned to the frequency of hegemony shield systems. "Impossible," Martix breathed as his tactical display erupted with warnings. The humans had somehow modified their civilian infrastructure into a coordinated military network. Even the building management systems had been transformed into battlefield assets. The city itself came alive. Electronic advertising boards switched from commercial displays to blinding strobes that disrupted alien targeting systems. Climate control units in office buildings vented superheated steam into carefully prepared kill zones. Automated window washing platforms became mobile sniper nests, their human operators using the familiar systems to outmaneuver the aliens' air superiority. "They're in the walls," screamed one of Martix's warriors as hidden panels in seemingly solid buildings slid open, revealing prepared firing positions. The humans had spent years incorporating defensive features into their urban development, disguising military hardware as civilian infrastructure. Colonel Wei's voice echoed through civilian broadcasting systems, reaching both her forces and the alien invaders. "Welcome to Singapore. You may have noticed some recent renovations." In the underground command center, Wei coordinated the defense with practiced efficiency. Each district of the city had been prepared for this moment, transformed into a three-dimensional battlefield that negated the aliens' technological advantages. "Sector 3, initiate traffic control protocols," she ordered. The city's autonomous vehicle network responded instantly, creating rolling roadblocks that channeled alien forces into prepared ambush zones. Electric buses, their batteries converted into mobile power stations, provided energy to hidden defense systems. Martix watched in growing horror as his forces lost control of the vertical battle space. Humans appeared and disappeared through maintenance hatches and secret passages, striking from unexpected angles before vanishing into the urban maze. Every skyscraper had become a fortress, every subway tunnel a potential ambush site. "They're using our own movement patterns against us," he reported to the fleet command. "Our tactical simulations, they're worse than useless. The humans know every centimeter of this city. They've turned its entire infrastructure into a weapon." In orbit, Supreme Commander Zixtal received the reports with mounting frustration. The humans weren't fighting according to any known doctrine. They had transformed their urban centers into living weapons, using their intimate knowledge of their own infrastructure to devastating effect. "Fall back to designated rally points," Martix ordered his remaining forces, only to discover that many of those positions had already been compromised. The humans had predicted their tactical protocols, using the aliens' own methodical nature against them. Colonel Wei allowed herself a small smile as she watched the alien forces begin their retreat. "Commence Phase 2, she ordered. "Show them that leaving is harder than entering." The city responded again, its transformed infrastructure now working to trap the aliens in killing zones they had created themselves. What had seemed like a simple occupation had become a nightmare of urban warfare, where every shadow could hide a threat and every piece of civilian technology could become an enemy. In his command post, Martix realized a terrible truth. They had conquered the buildings, but the humans still owned the city, and in this three-dimensional maze of steel and glass, that made all the difference. The Saharan sun beat down mercilessly as Scout Leader Kexri led his reconnaissance unit across the seemingly endless dunes. His environment suit's cooling systems worked overtime against the intense heat, while sand particles threatened to clog every joint in his armor. "This planet's climate variations are intolerable," he muttered into the command channel. "How do the humans survive in such extremes?" His question was answered by a distant rumbling. At first, he assumed it was thunder, despite the cloudless sky. Then his sensors detected movement, massive movement, across the entire dune field ahead. Major Amira Hassan watched through thermal imaging as the alien unit approached the trap. From her camouflaged command vehicle, buried beneath the sand, she gave the order. "Initiate Operation Sandstorm." Dozens of hidden vibration generators activated simultaneously, transforming the seemingly solid dunes into flowing rivers of sand. The aliens' heavy armor, designed for maximum protection, now became a deadly liability as they began sinking into the liquefied terrain. "Impossible," Kexri shouted as his unit's formation disintegrated. "The ground itself attacks us." While the aliens struggled with the shifting sands, human forces emerged from hidden bunkers, their armor and weapons specially designed for desert warfare. They moved across the unstable terrain with practiced ease, their equipment adapted through generations of desert combat. Simultaneously, on the other side of the world, another battle unfolded in the Arctic Circle. Commander Telvex's forces had established what they thought was a secure base on the Greenland ice sheet. Their sensors, calibrated for detecting energy weapons and powered armor, failed to notice the human forces approaching on simple snowmobiles. Captain Eric Anderson led the Arctic response team, their white camouflage gear blending perfectly with the blizzard conditions. "All units, execute Operation Whiteout," he ordered through his throat mic. The humans had drilled hundreds of holes in the ice sheet, creating a network of channels beneath the alien position. Now they pumped heated seawater through these channels, carefully weakening the ice structure beneath the enemy base. In the Amazon rainforest, yet another alien unit faced the planet's environmental fury. Their advanced motion trackers, designed to detect large force movements, were overwhelmed by the constant activity of the jungle itself. Every tree branch moved by wind, every animal call, created false positives that rendered their sophisticated equipment nearly useless. Lieutenant Isabella Santos and her rangers moved through the canopy on pre-positioned zip lines, their movements masked by the natural chaos of the rainforest. The aliens never saw them coming until it was too late. Back in orbit, Supreme Commander Zixtal received simultaneous distress calls from all three operations. His tactical displays showed the same pattern repeating across every terrain type on the planet. The humans weren't just surviving in these extreme environments. They were weaponizing them. How? He demanded of his staff. How do they operate so effectively in conditions that should kill them? The answer came from an unexpected source, a junior science officer who had been studying human historical records. "Sir, they've been fighting in these conditions for thousands of years. Every environment we find hostile, they've turned into a home. Every weather pattern we see as an obstacle, they've learned to use as a weapon." In the Sahara, Major Hassan's forces had completely surrounded the alien unit. The humans' equipment might have looked primitive compared to the alien technology, but it worked perfectly in conditions that had evolved to destroy anything more complex. You came to our world thinking we were primitive because we adapted to our environment instead of trying to overcome it, she transmitted to the surrounded aliens. That was your first mistake. Across the globe, human forces continued to demonstrate their mastery of Earth's diverse battlegrounds. Arctic warfare units disappeared into snowstorms that their enemies couldn't even survive in. Jungle fighters moved through triple canopy rainforest like ghosts. Desert units emerged from sandstorms to strike and vanish again. Supreme Commander Zixtal was forced to make a difficult admission. They had completely underestimated how humanity's long history of fighting in every environment on their world had shaped them into perfect adaptive warriors. Each climate, each terrain type that the hegemony saw as an obstacle, humans had turned into an advantage. The planet itself had become humanity's greatest ally, and the aliens were learning a harsh lesson about the difference between surviving in an environment and mastering it. Dr. Elena Santos stood before the hastily assembled panel of military leaders in the underground research facility beneath Geneva. Behind her, a captured alien shield generator hummed softly, its purple energy field casting strange shadows across the reinforced walls. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the exhaustion of 3 sleepless days, "we've discovered something extraordinary about the hegemony's shield technology, something they never expected us to find." On the main display screen, complex wave patterns danced and shifted. To her right, a standard military rifle sat on a testing bench, modified with what appeared to be surprisingly simple additions to its barrel and ammunition. "Their shields," she continued, "are essentially perfect against energy weapons. They've spent thousands of years developing defenses against lasers, plasma, and particle beams. But they've completely overlooked something far more basic. In orbit, Supreme Commander Zixtal was reviewing the latest battle reports when the first alerts began flooding in. Across every battlefield, human weapons were suddenly penetrating shields that had been impervious just hours before. "It's not possible," Battlemaster Renvax insisted, his scales flushing with agitation. "Their primitive kinetic weapons cannot breach our defensive fields. The mathematics are absolute." Dr. Santos chambered a round in the modified rifle. "The hegemony's shield frequency operates on a predictable wave pattern, designed to disperse energy attacks. But just like any wave, it has nodes, points where the oscillation reaches zero. We've discovered how to time our projectiles to pass through these nodes." The demonstration round passed straight through the captured shield, as if it wasn't there, embedding itself in the reinforced wall behind. The assembled military leaders leaned forward in their seats, suddenly very interested in what they had dismissed as outdated technology. "Even better," Santos added, bringing up a new diagram, "we can use their own shield frequency to enhance our weapons' effectiveness. The right timing doesn't just penetrate, it causes a cascading resonance failure." Across Earth's battlefields, the effects of this discovery were immediate and devastating. Modified tanks engaged alien heavy armor, their rounds passing through previously impenetrable barriers. Infantry units found their primitive rifles suddenly capable of engaging enemies that had seemed invulnerable. In the skies over Australia, Squadron Leader James Chen led the first attack run against an alien capital ship using the new technology. His fighter squadron carried missiles modified with the resonance matching system. "Remember," he transmitted to his pilots, "timing is everything. Let the targeting computer calculate the shield oscillation, and only fire when you get a solid lock." The alien vessel's defensive screen, which had shrugged off previous attacks, flickered and failed as the precisely timed warheads exploited its fundamental weakness. The mighty ship designed to withstand energy weapons that could vaporize cities fell to weapons its creators had considered obsolete. Dr. Santos continued her briefing, knowing similar scenes were playing out worldwide. The hegemony made a critical mistake. They assumed technological progress only moved in one direction, toward energy weapons and similar advanced systems. They never considered that we might take our primitive technology and perfect it beyond anything they imagined possible. Supreme Commander Zixtal watched in horror as reports of shield failures poured in from every front. His forces, trained to rely on their invulnerable defenses, had no doctrine for fighting without them. Tactics developed over thousands of years became worse than useless as human forces exploited weaknesses that no one in the hegemony had ever considered. Their weapons, a science officer reported, voice trembling. They're not just penetrating the shields. They're using our own defensive energy to amplify their attacks. Every time we increase shield power, we make their weapons more effective. In Geneva, Dr. Santos concluded her presentation to thunderous applause. The hegemony thought they were invulnerable because they'd solved every problem they could imagine. But they failed to consider that sometimes the oldest solutions, refined and perfected, can overcome the most advanced defenses. She gestured to the now offline shield generator. They built their entire military doctrine around technology they thought was perfect. We've just shown them that nothing is perfect, and that innovation doesn't always mean moving forward. Sometimes it means looking back, understanding the basics, and turning them into something extraordinary. The crystalline command deck of the Eternal Dawn had lost its serene atmosphere. Emergency alerts flashed across holographic displays as Supreme Commander Zixtal faced the unthinkable, total battlefield collapse across every front. "Report," he demanded, his scales now a sickly pale shade that reflected his growing horror. Battle Coordinator Vixna's tendrils twisted in distress as she delivered the news. "Sir, we've lost contact with 30% of our ground forces. Another 40% report they can no longer maintain formation cohesion. The humans, they're not fighting according to any known doctrine." On the ground below, Colonel Sarah Martins demonstrated exactly why the alien command structure was failing. Her battalion had split into 12 autonomous units, each one operating independently while maintaining perfect coordination through a mixture of pre-planned protocols and tactical improvisation. "Echo Team, create chaos in Sector 7, she ordered, watching her tactical display update in real time. "Foxtrot, be ready to exploit any openings they create. Everyone else, continue independent operations as planned." The alien forces, trained to operate in rigid formations under centralized control, found themselves surrounded by human units that seemed to appear from nowhere, strike decisively, and vanish before a proper response could be authorized through the chain of command. In orbit, Zixtal received yet another disturbing report. "Sir, 3 more ground force commanders have gone autonomous," a communications officer reported. "They're refusing to wait for central command authorization. They say the delays are getting their troops killed." The Supreme Commander's secondary eyes blinked rapidly in shock. Such a breakdown in discipline was unprecedented in the hegemony's military history. But as he watched the tactical displays, he began to understand why. A human strike team would appear, attack, and disappear in the time it took for his forces to request and receive permission to alter their formation. By the time a response was authorized, the humans had already moved on to their next target. "How are they coordinating without central control?" he demanded. "Every unit operates differently, yet somehow they maintain strategic coherence." The answer came from Colonel Martinez's next operation. Her team had surrounded a major alien formation, each small unit operating independently yet somehow forming a perfect tactical web. When the aliens attempted to break out in one direction, they found their path blocked by human forces that had anticipated the movement. When they tried another route, the same thing happened. Mission parameters clear, objectives defined, execution flexible, Martins transmitted to her teams. "Trust your training and your initiative. You know what needs to be done." The alien command staff watched in growing despair as their carefully constructed battle plans fell apart. Human forces seemed to anticipate their every move, not through superior technology or intelligence, but through a fundamental understanding of tactical principles that allowed them to predict and counter standardized responses. "They're inside our decision loop," Battle Coordinator Vixna realized aloud. By the time we analyze a situation, formulate a response, and receive authorization, they've already adapted and moved on. Our perfect discipline has become a weakness. The breaking point came when a group of alien ground commanders, faced with imminent destruction of their forces, chose to surrender to human forces rather than wait for retrieve authorization. The news sent shockwaves through the hegemony command structure. In her mobile command center, Colonel Martinez received the surrender offers with professional courtesy. "Your troops fought well," she told the alien commanders, "but you never understood that perfect coordination doesn't require perfect control." Supreme Commander Zixtal faced the ultimate military humiliation, watching his forces fragment as human attacks systematically destroy their ability to maintain centralized command. Each alien unit that went autonomous or surrendered created gaps in the defense network that human forces promptly exploited. Their command structure, he finally admitted to his staff, isn't primitive at all. It's evolved. While we perfected control, they perfected adaptation. While we standardized, they innovated. And now we're paying the price for our rigidity. The battle for Earth had become a lesson in military evolution, and humanity's path of adaptive command was proving superior to the hegemony's doctrine of perfect control. The Grand Council chamber of the hegemony flagship gleamed with crystalline perfection as Supreme Commander Zixtal faced the assembled diplomatic delegation from Earth. The contrast between the two groups could not have been more striking. The tall, iridescent forms of the hegemony counselors in their ceremonial armor, and the smaller human representatives in their simple formal attire. In 10,000 years of expansion, Senior Counselor Mexthor announced, his voice echoing through the chamber, "No species has ever forced us to request terms of peace. Yet here we stand." Dr. Elizabeth Chen, Earth's chief negotiator, allowed herself a small smile. "Perhaps that says more about your understanding of advancement than it does about us." The counselor's scales shifted colors in agitation at her directness, but they could not deny the truth of her words. The tactical displays surrounding them told the story. 70% of hegemony ground forces had been neutralized or had surrendered. Their supposedly invincible orbital fleet had been reduced to defensive positions by precisely targeted kinetic strikes. "We do not understand," another counselor admitted. "Your technology is primitive. Your weapons are basic. Your industrial capacity is far below our standard. How did you defeat our perfect systems?" "Perfection," Dr. Chen responded, "is often the enemy of effectiveness. You sought to eliminate variables. We embraced them. You standardized your responses. We diversified ours. You tried to control chaos. We learned to thrive in it." Supreme Commander Zixtal stepped forward, his bearing still proud despite his recent defeat. "You must understand our confusion. Everything we know about technological progress, about military doctrine, about the very nature of advancement, your victory contradicts it all." The human delegation shared knowing looks. General Marcus Thompson, who had coordinated much of Earth's defense, spoke up. "You develop your technology and tactics in isolation, always facing enemies who thought like you did. We developed ours through constant adaptation, facing challenges from our environment and each other. Every human culture contributed different approaches, different solutions." As if to emphasize his point, the tactical displays showed the ongoing process of hegemony forces being peacefully disarmed by human units from dozens of nations, each bringing their own unique approach to the task. "But surely," protested a junior counselor, "unity and standardization are stronger than diversity and variation." Dr. Chen gestured to one of her aides, who activated a holographic presentation. It showed scenes from the various battlefields. Human forces using everything from advanced robotics to modified farming equipment, from cyber warfare to simple ambush tactics. "Unity doesn't require uniformity," she explained. Each of these units operated independently, using different methods, different equipment, different strategies. But they all worked toward the same goal, each finding the best solution for their specific situation. The revelation seemed to ripple through the alien leadership. Their scales shifted through patterns of confusion, understanding, and finally, something approaching admiration. "You offer peace," Senior Counselor Mexthor stated, "after we attempted to conquer your world." "Why?" "Because that's another lesson we've learned through our history," Dr. Chen replied. "The best way to turn an enemy into an ally is to help them understand why they lost. We're not interested in revenge. We're interested in growth, yours and ours." The peace terms were surprisingly generous. Earth would join the hegemony not as a conquered world, but as an equal partner. Human military advisors would help reform the hegemony's forces, teaching them the value of adaptability and individual initiative. In return, the hegemony would share their advanced technology, allowing humanity to reach for the stars. As the treaty was formally sealed, Supreme Commander Zixtal approached Dr. Chen privately. "You know," he admitted, "when we first detected your world, I was disappointed. I thought you had nothing to teach us." "That," she responded with a warm smile, "was exactly the lesson you needed to learn. Sometimes the most advanced civilization isn't the one with the most sophisticated technology. It's the one that never stops learning, growing, and adapting." The chamber's crystalline walls reflected the historic scene. Two species, once enemies, now partners in forging a new understanding of progress. The hegemony had sought perfection in uniformity, only to discover that true strength lies in diversity, adaptability, and the wisdom to learn from those they had once dismissed as primitive.